truck's brakes hissed, and Elias Brooks didn't even look up from the crate he was stacking. 3,000 pounds of tomato skins hit the ground behind the barn in one wet, sliding wave, the same sound he'd heard almost every Tuesday for 8 years. The smell rolled out ahead of it, sour and sharp, and somewhere down the road, a car window rolled up fast. Only this time, before the driver pulled away, he leaned out and called across the fence line. "Got room for one more load next week, Elias? Heard you're turning people away now." Elias allowed himself a small smile and kept stacking. 8 years earlier, that same question would have come with a laugh, not a request. 8 years earlier, this pile behind his barn had a name in town. Garbage, plain and simple. And Elias Brooks had a name to go with it that stung a lot more than farmer. So what changed? What turns 8 years of rotting tomato skins and a county's worth of ridicule into something people are now asking to be part of? Stay with this one to the end, because the answer involves a drought, a notebook full of failed experiments, and a $650,000 business nobody, including Elias himself, saw coming. If stories like this move something in you, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. It genuinely helps this channel keep telling these stories. Elias was 49 when it all began, not 57. That came later, after the years had done their work on him. He was a widower by then, 3 years past losing his wife Margaret to an illness that had drained their savings faster than it drained her strength. The farm had been struggling before she got sick. After the funeral, it seemed to fail even faster, like the land itself had gone quiet with grief. His daughter Grace had a scholarship waiting for her in the city, a future that didn't smell like diesel and manure and unpaid bills. She turned it down anyway. "You can't run 200 acres by yourself," she told him, standing in the kitchen with her acceptance letter still unopened on the counter. "I've been running it alone for years," Elias said. "No," Grace said. "You've been failing at it alone. There's a difference, Dad." He didn't argue. He couldn't. The tractor coughed black smoke every time it started. The bank sent letters with red ink on the envelopes. 2 harvests in a row had come in thin, and a third one looked worse. Then, at a town meeting nobody particularly wanted to sit through, he heard something that changed the next 8 years of his life. The tomato cannery on the edge of town had a disposal problem. Every harvest season, it processed truckload after truckload of tomatoes into sauce and paste, leaving behind mountains of skins, seeds, and pulp with nowhere useful to go. Hauling it to the landfill cost the company money it didn't want to spend. Someone at the meeting joked that the cannery would practically pay a man to take it off their hands. Elias didn't laugh. He drove to the cannery the next morning. "I hear you've got a waste problem," he said to the manager, a tired man named Roy Pratt. "You have no idea," Roy said. "I'll take every load you've got." Roy looked at him like he'd just offered to marry his sister. "You know what that stuff smells like after 2 days baking in the sun? I've got 200 acres and nothing left to lose," Elias said. "Try me." The deal cost Elias nothing but his pride. Free waste, free hauling. A handshake that felt small at the time and turned out to be the biggest decision of his life. Roy walked away, thinking he'd gotten the better end of it. Word spread fast, the way it does in a small town. By the time the first truck actually pulled up to the barn that spring, half the county already knew Elias Brooks had agreed to let rotting tomato waste be dumped on his land, on purpose, for free, every single week. They had a name for him before the second load even arrived. The tomato trash farmer, Walter Hayes announced at the feed store, grinning around a line of customers who were only too happy to listen. Walter ran the biggest cattle operation in the county and had never once missed a chance to remind people of it. Real proud moment for the Brooks name, Elias, Walter said, louder than he needed to. Your daddy built that farm growing food. Now you're building a landfill. A few men chuckled. Elias kept loading feed sacks into his truck bed without looking up. Somebody's got to take it, he said. Sure, somebody desperate enough. That one landed harder than Walter probably meant it to. Elias closed his tailgate and drove home in silence, jaw tight the whole way, the word desperate sitting in his chest like a stone. It didn't get easier. By that first summer, 3 trucks a week were arriving, and the pile behind the barn had grown into a small, glistening mountain that the wind carried straight into town on bad days. The sheriff's office started getting calls. A county inspector showed up twice with a clipboard, warning Elias about runoff and public nuisance violations, using words like citation and fine that made Grace go quiet at the dinner table. Dad, she said one evening, watching flies swarm over the pile in the fading light. What if this doesn't work? What if it's just garbage, and we're the fools standing next to it? He didn't have an answer for her that night. Then came the rain. 3 days of it, hard and unrelenting, turning the pile into a black, sliding sludge that smelled worse than anything before it. Nutrients washed straight into the creek behind the property. The county's warning letter arrived by certified mail this time. Grace found her father sitting on the porch steps past midnight, head in his hands, phone in his lap. Maybe Walter's right, Elias muttered. Maybe I really have lost my mind. His thumb was already on Roy Pratt's number, ready to call the whole thing off. Then he remembered something his grandfather used to say, decades earlier, standing over a compost heap behind a farmhouse that didn't exist anymore. Nothing rots properly unless it can breathe. Elias sat with that sentence a long time. He'd been treating the pile like a dump instead of something alive, something that needed air moving through it, moisture balanced just right, materials layered instead of dumped in one wet, suffocating mass. He'd been doing it wrong from the start, and the land had been trying to tell him for months. So he started over. He read every library book on soil science he could find, drove 2 hours to sit in the back of an agricultural extension workshop meant for men half his age, and began experimenting behind the barn like a man running out of chances. Because he was. Different pile heights, different turning schedules, horse manure bartered from a neighbor, dry leaves raked from his own tree line, sawdust traded for labor at the lumber mill, chicken litter hauled over from a coop 3 farms down. Most of it failed. Some piles overheated and killed everything inside them. Others sat cold for months and refused to break down at all. An entire year passed, then another. Grace started keeping a notebook. Temperatures, moisture levels, which combinations produced something dark and crumbling, and which produced nothing but stink and disappointment. Nearly 3 years in, on a pile Elias had almost given up on entirely, something changed. The soil turned dark, almost black. soft enough to run through your fingers like coffee grounds. Earthworms moved through it in numbers he'd never seen on his land. He planted a test row of tomatoes in it that spring. Half expecting nothing, they grew taller than anything else on the farm, fuller. They held on weeks longer than the rest of the field before the first frost threatened them. Coincidence, Walter said when word reached the feed store, though he said it a little less certainly than before. Elias didn't argue. He just kept working, quietly expanding the method, refining the ratios in Grace's notebook until the process became reliable instead of lucky, which took the better part of a 4th year to get right at scale. Then, in year 5, the drought came, and everything changed at once. It was the worst dry spell the county had seen in decades. Corn curled brown in fields that had never failed before. Backyard gardens across town shriveled by July. Wells ran low. Farmers who'd spent years mocking Elias started losing sleep over their own dying crops. His fields stayed green, not untouched by the heat, but green, holding moisture in a way the rest of the county's parched soil simply couldn't. The compost he'd spent years perfecting held water like a sponge, releasing it slowly instead of losing it to the sun. People started noticing, started asking questions they'd never bothered asking before. One evening, Walter Hayes drove out past the property line and walked his own fence in the dark, staring across at the Brooks farm like he was trying to solve something he didn't want to admit was bothering him. He didn't knock. He just stood there a long time, then drove home without a word. Grace was the one who finally pushed things forward. "We should sell it," she said one morning, holding up a fistful of the dark, crumbling compost. "People are asking, Dad. We should just sell it." They bagged the first batch by hand in the barn, using whatever containers they could find, and printed simple labels off the home computer. 20 bags at the farmer's market, priced just high enough to cover the cost of the bags. Every single customer came back the following week for more. Word moved through the local gardening club, then further out. A nearby nursery placed an order bigger than anything the Brooks farm had sold in years. Not vegetables this time, but dirt. Actual, honest dirt people were willing to pay real money for. Within a season, regional farmers were calling about bulk orders faster than the family could fill them. The barn, once home to a dying tractor and worse memories, became a full-time packing operation. Grace built a website late at night after the day's work was done, and orders started arriving from counties they'd never sold into before. A local reporter came out to write about the trash farmer turned soil supplier, and the story caught more attention than anyone expected. A regional farming magazine picked it up next, running photos of Elias standing in a field that had nearly ended his family's future just a few years earlier. Then, in year 7, Roy Pratt came back, this time with 2 executives from the cannery's parent company standing beside him. They walked the fields in silence, watching workers bag compost from what used to be a nuisance dump nobody else wanted. Roy didn't say much. He didn't need to. The waste his company once paid to haul away had become the foundation of a business now shipping across state lines. Instead of a handshake this time, they offered Elias a formal, long-term supply contract. Guaranteed cannery waste, delivered on schedule, at no cost, in exchange for a standing partnership that made both operations look good on paper. Elias signed it at his own kitchen table, the same table where he used to run numbers that never worked out. By the 8th year, the brand built from rotting tomato skins was pulling in $650,000 annually, its bags stacked on shelves in garden centers 3 states over. Walter Hayes showed up at the barn on a quiet Sunday that same year, hat in his hands, looking nothing like the man who used to hold court at the feed store. "I was wrong about you," Walter said, staring at his boots. "Wrong for a long time, Elias." Elias studied him for a moment, then walked over to a stack of finished compost bags and handed him 2. "No charge," he said. Walter opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, thought better of it, nodded once, and carried the bags to his truck without another word. The trucks still come every Tuesday, same as they have for 8 years now. Only nobody holds their nose anymore. Children wave at the drivers instead of pinching their noses shut. Farmers who once crossed the street to avoid Elias now pull into his driveway with notebooks of their own, asking questions instead of making jokes. A young farmer stopped by that spring, watching Grace direct a crew loading the week's shipment, and asked Elias the question everyone eventually gets around to. "How did you know tomato skins would turn into something like this?" Elias thought about it the way he always did before answering anything that mattered. "I didn't," he said. "I just figured nature has a way of rewarding people who refuse to waste what they've been given." The sun was low over the fields that evening, throwing long gold light across rows of dark, healthy soil where a garbage pile used to sit. Behind the barn, the last bags of the day were loaded onto a truck, headed out of state, soil built out of 8 years of stubbornness, failure, and a smell nobody else had been willing to stand next to. If this story reminded you that the thing people mock you for today might be the exact thing that changes your life 8 years from now, don't scroll away without hitting subscribe. Drop a comment and tell us which part hit you hardest. Like this video if you made it to the end, and share it with someone standing next to their own pile of garbage right now. Because it might just be worth $650,000 someday.